The numbers on the screen swam before my eyes. I blinked, convinced I was seeing things wrong. $3,000 gone. Then another $5,000 the next week. And another. Each transaction labeled with vague descriptions like marketing expenses or office supplies that reeked of lies. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic bird trapped in a cage. It couldn't be. Not Brandon. My son. The boy I'd poured everything into. But the account belonged to my business, Hood Construction, the business I planned to leave him one day. What in the hell was he doing? My breath hitched in my throat. He knew how hard I worked for every single dollar. Hadn't I taught him the value of honest labor? My mind raced, trying to find a rational explanation, some other explanation. Maybe a mistake. A glitch? But deep down, a cold dread was settling in my stomach. This felt deliberate. This felt like a betrayal. Like a knife twisting in my gut, delivered by the one person I trusted most in the world. If you are watching this right now, drop a comment, letting me know where you are viewing from. Kindly hit the like and subscribe, to hear more real stories about family loyalty and betrayal. They might just change how you see your own relationships. The smell of sawdust and fresh coffee always grounded me, but today, it couldn't cut through the unease. My name is Frank Hood, and I'm 53 years old. For the last 30 years, I've built Hood Construction from the ground up. It's more than just a business, it's my legacy. My father started it, and I poured my blood, sweat, and tears into making it what it is today, a respected, profitable company. We build homes, we renovate businesses, we create spaces where families and communities thrive. That's what makes it worthwhile. My world is pretty simple. Early mornings at the job site, checking in with the crew, poring over blueprints, negotiating contracts. Evenings are spent at home, usually alone, but content. My wife, Susan, passed away 5 years ago from cancer, and the grief is still a constant companion. It's dulled with time, but it's always there, a shadow in the corner of the room. The business became my lifeline, my purpose. And my son, Brandon, became my beacon of hope. Brandon is 25. He's a good-looking kid, charming, and quick-witted. He started working summers for me when he was 16, sweeping floors and hauling lumber. I always envisioned him taking over the business someday, carrying on the Hood name. He went to college for business management, which I was so proud of. When he graduated 2 years ago, I offered him a full-time position in the office, handling administrative tasks and learning the ropes. He seemed enthusiastic, eager to prove himself. I placed him in charge of the company account. I thought he had potential. Now, he seems more interested in impressing his girlfriend, Tiffany, than learning about construction. Tiffany is, well, she's a piece of work. Beautiful, undeniably, with long blonde hair and those bright blue eyes. But there's something calculating about her, something grasping. She's always dressed to the nines, dripping in designer clothes and flashing expensive jewelry. She doesn't work. I don't know what she does all day. I just know she's always out shopping. Brandon is head over heels for her. He spends all his free time, and, it seems, company money, showering her with gifts. Every weekend, they're jetting off to some exotic destination. It's a lifestyle he can't afford, not on his salary, not even with my help. It's gotten to the point where I've seen him driving a different car every week. He's driving me crazy. That's what's at stake here. My legacy, my business, my son's future. The inheritance I plan to leave him, which now feels like a dangerous weapon in the wrong hands. His potential happiness, which is being warped and twisted by this woman. And perhaps even my own peace of mind, which is being threatened by the simmering tension between us. The underlying tension has been building for months. I've tried talking to Brandon about his spending habits, about being more responsible. He brushes it off, says he's young, and he deserves to enjoy life. He says I'm old-fashioned, that I don't understand the new economy. He gets defensive, and our conversations always end in arguments. Susan always knew how to handle him. She had a way of reaching him, of making him see reason. But she's not here anymore. And I'm left to navigate this treacherous terrain alone. Last week, I found a receipt in the company garbage can for a diamond bracelet from Tiffany's birthday. It was for $10,000, an expense that I didn't approve. The company has been doing very well in the last year. I could afford to give it to her, but that wasn't his decision to make. I confronted Brandon about it, and he lied. He looked me straight in the eye and said he didn't know anything about it. That was the moment I knew something was seriously wrong. I knew I had to do something. I just didn't know what yet. But I knew it couldn't go on like this. That's what I'm afraid of most. What am I going to do? As I left the office that evening, I noticed a strange car parked across the street, a black sedan with tinted windows. I didn't think much of it at the time, but now, looking back, I wonder if it was a sign of things to come, a silent harbinger of the storm that was about to engulf my life. The thought sent a chill down my spine. The chill in the air this morning wasn't just from the autumn wind, it was a cold, hard certainty settling in my bones. The discovery moment was a slow burn, a creeping dread that intensified with each passing day. It started with the receipt, the blatant lie. Then came the subtle discrepancies in the company account. Small amounts at first, a few $100s here and there. I'd chalked it up to careless accounting. Maybe he was simply inexperienced. But then, the numbers started to grow, to become bigger and bolder. Until they were too big to ignore. Yesterday, I decided to dig deeper. After Brandon left for the day, I pulled up the bank statements on my computer. I spent hours poring over the transactions, comparing them to invoices and expense reports. And that's when I found it. The smoking gun. A series of large withdrawals, all made within the last few months, all masked with vague descriptions. Consulting fees, equipment maintenance, software upgrades. All bogus. All leading to one conclusion: Brandon was stealing from me. From the company. From his own future. The shock was visceral, a punch to the gut that left me gasping for air. Disbelief washed over me, followed by a wave of white-hot anger. How could he do this? How could he betray me like this? Hadn't I given him everything? Hadn't I trusted him implicitly? I stumbled back from the computer, my legs weak and unsteady. The office seemed to spin around me, the familiar surroundings suddenly alien and hostile. I sank into my chair, my head in my hands. The emotional fallout was devastating. It wasn't just about the money, although that was significant. It was about the broken trust, the shattered dreams. It was about the realization that the son I thought I knew was a stranger, a selfish, greedy stranger. I thought of Susan, and a fresh wave of grief washed over me. She would have been heartbroken. She would have known what to do. But she wasn't here. And I was alone, facing the biggest betrayal of my life. That night, I couldn't sleep. I tossed and turned, replaying the events of the day over and over in my mind. I imagined confronting Brandon, screaming at him, demanding an explanation. But I knew that wouldn't accomplish anything. He would just lie again, or try to deflect the blame. I had to be smart. I had to be strategic. I had to figure out a way to stop him, to make him understand the consequences of his actions. And that meant playing a game. A game he didn't even know he was in. The immediate consequences were already being felt. The stolen money had put a strain on the company's cash flow. We were behind on payments to some of our suppliers. I had to scramble to find alternative funding to keep the projects on track. I had considered laying off workers, and that made me feel sick to my stomach. I had to protect my men. I also had to confront the reality of Brandon's actions. He was not the son I thought he was. He was reckless, irresponsible, and dishonest. And he was jeopardizing everything I had worked so hard to build. I knew I had to act decisively. I couldn't let this continue. But I also knew that whatever I did, it would have lasting consequences. It could damage our relationship beyond repair. It could even destroy his future. He was hurting me, he was hurting himself. But I was still his father. Later, I found myself walking into the living room. I poured myself a large glass of whiskey. As I stared out the window into the dark night, I made a promise to myself. I would find a way to teach Brandon a lesson. A lesson he would never forget. He must have known I knew something. He started avoiding me. No more lunch, no more hanging around after closing. What was he planning? What would he do if I confronted him? The next morning, when I arrived at the office, I found a note on my desk. It was from Brandon. He said he needed to take some time off, that he was feeling overwhelmed. He said he didn't know when he would be back. My blood ran cold. Was this his way of running away? Of escaping the consequences of his actions? The smell of old files and stale coffee filled the air as I began digging deeper, each document a painful reminder of my shattered trust. Brandon's sudden absence only fueled my suspicion. I knew he was lying. He wasn't overwhelmed. He was running. But where was he running to? And with how much of my money? I decided to launch my own investigation. I started by going through his computer, his emails, his browsing history. It felt like an invasion of privacy, but I had no choice. I needed to know the truth. I needed to understand the full extent of his betrayal. What I found was even worse than I imagined. He had been using company funds to pay for Tiffany's lavish lifestyle. Luxury vacations, designer clothes, expensive jewelry. He had even bought her a new car, a sleek sports car that cost more than my first house. I pulled out the receipt and started reading every detail. He had been living a double life, pretending to be a successful businessman while secretly draining the company's resources. And Tiffany was complicit, encouraging him, egging him on. It was a sickening realization. I also discovered that he had been transferring money to a secret bank account, an account I didn't know existed. He had been siphoning off funds for months, carefully concealing his tracks. He was a master manipulator, a skilled liar. I never knew he was capable of such deception. I felt like a fool. Blinded by my love for him, I had failed to see the warning signs. I had trusted him implicitly, and he had betrayed me in the worst possible way. But I wasn't going to let him get away with it. I was going to expose him, to hold him accountable for his actions. I was going to make him pay. I needed help. I couldn't do this alone. So, I turned to an old friend, a retired detective named Joe. Joe was a no-nonsense kind of guy, tough, smart, and fiercely loyal. He had helped me out in the past, and I knew I could trust him. I met Joe at a diner on the edge of town. I told him everything, about the stolen money, the secret bank account, Tiffany's extravagant lifestyle. He listened intently, his face grim. "Frank," he said, "this is serious. He's committed fraud, embezzlement. You could press charges." I hesitated. I didn't want to send my son to jail. But I also couldn't let him continue down this path. He needed to learn a lesson, a hard lesson. "I don't want to press charges," I said. "Not yet. I just want to know the full extent of what he's done. I want to know where the money is, and what he's planning to do with it." Joe nodded. "I can help you with that," he said. "I can track the money, find out where it's going. I can also keep an eye on Brandon and Tiffany, see what they're up to." We staged several raids on the office and job sites, confiscating trucks, tools, and computers. We even put up foreclosure notices on the building. It was all fake, of course, but it looked incredibly real. The key was to make sure Brandon believed it. We had to convince him that the company was on the brink of ruin, that his actions had led to our downfall. I started acting stressed and anxious, constantly complaining about financial problems. I stopped going out, stopped answering my phone, and isolated myself from everyone. I even started selling off some of my personal possessions, my classic car, my antique watch collection. It was all part of the act, designed to convince Brandon that I was desperate. Meanwhile, Joe was keeping tabs on Brandon and Tiffany. He reported that they were growing increasingly anxious, that they were starting to suspect something was wrong. "They're getting nervous, Frank," Joe said. "They can sense that something's not right. They're starting to ask questions." That was exactly what I wanted. I wanted them to feel the pressure, to feel the fear. I wanted them to realize that their lavish lifestyle was about to come crashing down. I prepared the fake court papers with Joe's friend. They were expertly crafted, with official-looking seals and signatures. They stated that Hood Construction was bankrupt, that all assets were being seized, and that I was personally liable for millions of dollars in debt. I made sure that Brandon saw the papers, leaving them lying around the office where he couldn't miss them. I wanted him to panic, to realize the gravity of the situation. The most difficult part was watching Tiffany's reaction. She was clearly terrified. She started distancing herself from Brandon, spending less time with him, avoiding his calls. I knew she was only interested in him for his money, and now that the money was gone, she was ready to jump ship. That was exactly what I wanted. I wanted her to abandon him, to leave him alone and penniless. I wanted him to see her for who she really was, a shallow, materialistic gold digger. I hired a fake lawyer and started having fake meetings. This was to make it look like I was trying to fight the bankruptcy, but was losing everything. As the plan unfolded, I felt a mix of emotions. Guilt for deceiving my son. Anxiety for the potential consequences. And determination to see it through to the end. I knew it was a risky gamble, but I was willing to take the chance. I had to teach Brandon a lesson he would never forget. Would it work? Would Brandon see through the deception? Would Tiffany abandon him? Would I be able to salvage our relationship? The suspense was almost unbearable. But I couldn't back down now. I had come too far. I had to see it through to the end. I had Joe follow Tiffany around, just to make sure she didn't warn Brandon. But, my plan was starting to crumble when Brandon decided to confront me face to face. "Dad," he asked. "What's going on? Are we really going bankrupt?" As I was about to answer Brandon's questions, Tiffany barged into the room. "Brandon, we need to talk," she said, her voice cold and distant. "I can't do this anymore." My heart skipped a beat. Was this the moment of truth? Was my plan about to succeed? Or was everything about to fall apart? The air crackled with tension as the carefully constructed facade of my life began to crumble, exposing the raw emotions beneath. Tiffany's words hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. Brandon stared at her, his face a mask of confusion and disbelief. "What do you mean, you can't do this anymore?" he asked, his voice trembling. "I mean, I can't be with you if you're broke," she said, her voice cold and matter-of-fact. "I need someone who can provide for me, who can give me the lifestyle I'm accustomed to." Brandon's face crumpled. He looked like a wounded animal, betrayed and abandoned. "But I thought you loved me," he said, his voice barely a whisper. Tiffany laughed, a harsh, brittle sound. "Love?" she said. "Love has nothing to do with it. This was about money, Brandon. And now that the money's gone, so am I." She turned and walked away, her heels clicking on the floor, her designer handbag swinging from her shoulder. Brandon watched her go, his eyes filled with pain and despair. I stepped forward, placing a hand on his shoulder. He flinched, as if I had burned him. "Brandon," I said, my voice gentle. "I'm so sorry." He turned to me, his eyes filled with anger and resentment. "Sorry," he said. "You're sorry. You did this to me. You let the company go bankrupt. You ruined my life." I took a deep breath, steeling myself for the confrontation. This was the moment of truth. This was the moment where I had to reveal the truth, to explain my actions, to hope that he would understand. "Brandon," I said, "the company isn't bankrupt. It was all a lie. A staged bankruptcy. I did it to teach you a lesson." His face contorted with rage. "A lesson?" he screamed. "You put me through all this for a lesson? You're insane." "I did it because I love you," I said, my voice rising. "I did it because I couldn't stand to watch you throw your life away on a woman who only cared about your money. I did it because I wanted you to understand the consequences of your actions." I told him everything, about the stolen money, the secret bank account, Tiffany's extravagant lifestyle. I told him about the fake court papers, the staged repossession, the lengths I had gone to make him believe that the company was bankrupt. He listened in stunned silence, his face gradually softening as he realized the truth. When I finished, he looked at me, his eyes filled with shame and regret. "I can't believe I did this," he said, his voice barely audible. "I can't believe I stole from you. I can't believe I almost ruined everything." "It's okay," I said, pulling him into a hug. "It's over now. You've learned your lesson. And we can start over." The immediate fallout was intense. Brandon was devastated by Tiffany's betrayal. He felt foolish, ashamed, and angry. But he was also relieved that the company wasn't bankrupt, that he hadn't ruined everything. He apologized profusely, promising to pay back the stolen money, to work hard to earn my trust again. I accepted his apology, but I also made it clear that he would have to prove himself. He would have to earn back my trust, one step at a time. I gave him a smaller role in the company, one that came with less responsibility and less access to the company finances. He agreed without hesitation, eager to prove that he was worthy of my trust. Tiffany, on the other hand, was furious. She called me, screaming and threatening, demanding that I give Brandon back his money. I hung up on her. I was done with her. The truth about Brandon's actions eventually came out. The news spread like wildfire, and his reputation was tarnished. He lost friends, acquaintances, even some family members. He became reclusive, withdrawn, and depressed. But he also started to change. He stopped spending money on frivolous things. He started volunteering at a local charity. He started focusing on his work. He was slowly rebuilding his life, one brick at a time. I knew it wouldn't be easy. He had a long road ahead of him. But I believed in him. I knew that he had the strength and the resilience to overcome this setback, to become a better person. But just when I thought everything was going to be okay, Joe calls with more bad news. It turns out Brandon had told one of his closest friends about his plan to move to California. Brandon's friend invested in it. With my rival's money. Joe tells me that my rival company has invested in Brandon's plan. They believe that my business is failing, and that with the information Brandon has, they can put me out of business for good. He tells me that they are planning a meeting with Brandon to discuss the final details. He wants me to be there. I had a decision to make. Confront Brandon and end it all. Or listen in and betray him again. The silence in my office was deafening, broken only by the ticking of the clock, each tick a reminder of the irreversible decisions I had made. Learning about Brandon's continued involvement with my rival company felt like a second betrayal, a cruel twist of the knife. Despite everything, despite the staged bankruptcy, despite Tiffany's abandonment, he was still planning to betray me, still working to undermine my business. The anger I felt was unlike anything I had experienced before. It was a cold, simmering rage that threatened to consume me whole. I wanted to lash out, to confront Brandon, to demand an explanation. But I knew that wouldn't accomplish anything. He would just lie again, or try to justify his actions. I decided to follow Joe's advice and attend the meeting with my rival company. I needed to know the truth, to understand the full extent of Brandon's betrayal. Joe arranged for me to be hidden in a nearby room, where I could listen in on the conversation without being seen. The meeting was held in a private room at a fancy restaurant. Brandon arrived looking nervous and apprehensive. He was greeted by Mr. Thompson, the owner of my rival company, a man I had known and despised for years. As the conversation unfolded, I learned the truth. Brandon had been feeding Mr. Thompson information about my company for months, providing him with confidential data, insider secrets, and competitive advantages. He had been working with Mr. Thompson to undermine my business, to steal my clients, to drive me out of the market. He did this because he was angry and desperate. He felt like I had ruined his life, that I had taken away his chance at happiness. He wanted to get revenge, to hurt me the way I had hurt him. I listened in horror as Brandon and Mr. Thompson discussed their plans, their strategies, their malicious intentions. I felt a wave of nausea wash over me, a mix of anger, disappointment, and despair. When the meeting ended, I confronted Brandon. He was shocked and terrified to see me. He tried to deny everything, but I had heard enough. "It's over, Brandon," I said, my voice cold and hard. "I know everything. I know what you've been doing. I know who you've been working with." He broke down, sobbing and begging for forgiveness. He said he was sorry, that he didn't mean to hurt me, that he was just trying to get his life back. I didn't say anything. I just turned and walked away. I couldn't forgive him. Not this time. The long-term consequences for everyone were devastating. I severed all ties with Brandon. I couldn't trust him anymore. I couldn't forgive him for his betrayal. He lost everything. His family, his friends, his reputation, his future. He was left alone, with nothing but his guilt and regret. I confronted Mr. Thompson, exposing his unethical and illegal behavior. He denied everything, but the damage was done. His reputation was ruined, his business suffered, and he was eventually forced to sell his company. I spent years rebuilding my business, repairing the damage that Brandon and Mr. Thompson had caused. It was a long and difficult process, but I eventually succeeded. I learned a valuable lesson about trust, about family, about the importance of honesty and integrity. I learned that sometimes, the people you love the most are the ones who can hurt you the most. I never remarried. I never had another child. I devoted myself to my business, to my community, to making the world a better place. Years later, I received a letter from Brandon. He said he was living a simple life, working as a carpenter in a small town. He said he was happy, that he had finally found peace. He apologized again for his actions, expressing his deep remorse and regret. He said he understood why I couldn't forgive him, that he deserved everything that had happened to him. I didn't respond to the letter. I didn't know what to say. But I felt a sense of closure, a sense of peace. The final satisfying twist came years later, when I received a call from a young woman who introduced herself as Brandon's daughter. She said she had heard about me, about my business, about my generosity. She asked if she could meet me. I hesitated, but then I agreed. I met her for lunch at a small cafe near my office. She was beautiful, intelligent, and kind. She reminded me of Susan. We talked for hours, about her father, about her life, about her dreams. I learned that Brandon had turned his life around, that he had become a good man, a loving father, and a valued member of his community. I realized that I had been wrong to give up on him, that he had deserved a second chance. I offered her a job at my company. She accepted. As she walked away, I felt a sense of hope, a sense of redemption. Maybe, just maybe, I could finally find peace. Maybe the cycle of betrayal could finally end, with a new generation, with a new beginning. Thank you for spending your time with my story. Feel free to share your thoughts or reactions in the comments. I'd love to hear from you.